I want to refer to a book entitled, it's in French, La guerre eschatologique by Hosein. Is that how you pronounce it? Any French-speaking speaker? No French-speaking? Hosein. And the name of the book is La guerre eschatologique, or the war, eschatological war. Recently published. But he compares Christian eschatology and Jewish eschatology and Muslim eschatology in this book. And before we take up our subject, let me share with you some of his comments. He says that eschatology teaches us that these three religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, are incompatible with each other for the simple reason that their future, their vision of the future diverge on this fundamental point, that at the end of time, one and only one must triumph. The others must be converted among Christians and among Muslims, or they must disappear altogether. Among Jews, in fact, there is not a will to convert others to Judaism. Entire Jewish activism and all the propaganda put by the Jewish intellectuals through their speeches, their films, their novels, etc., is to discredit the idea of religion, of race, of homeland, and any sense of belonging among others in order to raise the Jews above the mass of the Goyim. They think that when all nations have been destroyed, transformed into multicultural societies, when all religions have been obliterated, and when a world government has been established, probably after the Armageddon or the Great War or the Malhama, then an absolute and definitive peace will reign over the world. That's when the long-awaited Messiah will come. Jews who have kept their traditions will then be recognized by all of mankind as the chosen people of God Almighty. Hosein continues to speak now about Islam. He says, in Islam also there is the idea that the whole world must submit and must accept the message of the Prophet. However, as I said, this is to convert others, not to destroy them. Unlike Judaism, Islam is not a closed sect, but an open and a universalist religion, which is indeed like Christianity. It should, however, be borne in mind that we repeatedly find in the Quran the idea of fighting the infidels. Fighting the infidels, arms in your hand if necessary. As an infidel, it bothers me a little on the neck. This is his view of Islam. How do Muslim theologians envisage the end of this confrontation with the West and with Zionism? Here is what he has to say. The author of the book, La guerre eschatologique. He mentions my name now. As a theologian, Imran Hosein has understood perfectly that the Christian West is now widely Judaized due to an incessant cosmopolitan propaganda in the media. Abortion, homosexuality, lesbianism, adultery are legalized today, he wrote. They have become Jewish. I never said that. He rightly said of the Europeans. I never said that. Imran Hosein also strongly condemns the Western maneuvers in view of the establishment of a world government. For him, in any case, things are very clear. God punished the Jews for the first time with a Babylonian army. He punished them for the second time with a Roman army. And the third time, which is to come, he'll be punishing them with a Muslim army. As for the Christians, who have not been able to preserve themselves from the Jewish nihilism, they should stop worshipping Jesus as if he was God, and they will be forced to recognize him as a prophet. These are my views. We note here, he says, that there's a difference between the tone of the Muslims who recognize Jesus as a prophet and the Jews who in their Talmud insult Christ and believe that he's the son of a prostitute and a Roman soldier. In Muslim eschatology, Jesus is also sometimes referred to as the Mahdi. In Muslim eschatology, Jesus is also sometimes referred to as the Mahdi, one who is guided by God, who will overcome the Antichrist in the end of time. Because there's also an Antichrist according to Muslims. They call him Dajjal. And as for the Christians, the Antichrist, they call him Dajjal. And as for the Christian, the Antichrist who will persecute the faithful before being finally defeated, comes from a Jewish sect, which is not at all surprising. The main difference is that Muslims believe that at the end of time there will be an earthly triumph, as the Jews also believe. But Christians, including Catholics, have abandoned any idea of victory on earth. The Catholic eschatology is confused, to be honest. It is not motivating. As among Jews or among Shiite Muslims who are working to bring their Messiah, in rare texts one may believe in an evangelism of all nations. This is the sixth period of the church, described by the Venerable Bartholomew Hauser, which precedes the great apostasy. In the next period, that of the Antichrist, we read that the only possible victory for Christians in those terrible days is to be defeated, persecuted, tormented, and put to death while remaining faithful, constant, and firm. This example is symptomatic. We see that Christians are disarmed morally, and that the heroes that they could be, and the heroes that could be, are transformed into martyrs. I have quoted extensively from R.A. Brisson because his is one of the most recent works and is widely read now in France, to show how our eschatology has not been presented, and there is such massive misunderstanding of our eschatology. So let us begin by correcting some of the misconceptions. Is it the agenda of Islam to rule the world? Is there anything in the Quran, is there anything in the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam which gives Muslims an agenda of waging perpetual jihad until you establish the rule of Islam over all of mankind? I have not found any such nonsense. I have not found any such nonsense in the Quran or in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But you still have people with schoolboy methodology who will take one isolated verse and use that to build a theory. So let's leave the schoolboys. They're wasting our time. No, Islam does not have a mission to establish the rule of Islam over all of mankind. No. Well then, for what purpose do we wage war? Jihad in Islam, based on the Quran, which is the supreme authority, is that you wage war in response to aggression. But even when aggression is committed against you, you do not respond with warfare unless and until you have explored and exhausted all possible peaceful means of resolving the problem. That is the Islam which comes from the Quran and from Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. So this is not a warlike religion. It is only when you have explored and exhausted all possible peaceful means for resolving the problem of aggression, only then do you have the right to wage war. And when we wage war, if the enemy inclines to peace, and you cannot incline to peace while holding on to the bloody fruits of your aggression. You cannot incline to peace while holding on to the bloody fruits of your aggression. If the enemy inclines to peace, which means giving up the bloody fruits of your aggression, then we must reciprocate and incline to peace. That is the Quran. Secondly, the Quran orders us. This is not permission to fight. No, this is not permission to fight. أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتَلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا. This is now a command. وَمَا لَكُمْ. What's wrong with you? لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. That you do not stand up, rise up and fight in the way of Allah. For what purpose? That one was in response to aggression. This one is to liberate the oppressed. Islam, the religion, has zero tolerance for oppression. And the government of Ukraine, which was made on the streets of Ukraine, better listen carefully. Islam has zero tolerance for oppression. And if you use your armed forces against your own people, that's oppression. And Russia will have every right to respond. وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ الَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا أَخْرِجْنَا مِنْ هَذِهِ الْقَرْيَةِ ظَالِمِ أَهْلُهَا إِلَى آخِرِ الْآيَةِ. Not only must they be oppressed, but more than that, the oppressed must be crying out, asking for help to be liberated from oppression. And when they do that, then you have an obligation, Muslims, wherever you are in the world, to intervene and to liberate the oppressed. And so Islam, the religion, did not come to conquer the world. It never came to establish its rule over the world. But it most certainly came to liberate the world from oppression, provided that the oppressed are themselves crying out for liberation from oppression. So this is a misreading of the Islamic concept of warfare. But I can't blame the author of the book, nor can I blame European scholarship, because Dajjal, in his cunning, created the Ottoman so-called Islamic Empire. And for 500 years, the Ottoman so-called Islamic Empire gave precisely this conception of jihad. That jihad is eternal warfare. Well, we can take a little rest in winter time, but when the spring and the summer comes, back to the battlefield every year. And so this is a state which was created for warfare. And the Ottoman Empire waged war for 500 years, again and again and again and again. And the world of Islam applauded. MashaAllah, look at these Ghazis, look at these great Mujahideen, waging war for the triumph of Islam, taking Islam all through Europe. How sad that our people were so brainwashed. Up to this day, scholarship, brainwashed. Guess whom the Ottomans waged war against? Did they wage war against Britain? Did they wage war against France? Did they wage war against Western Christianity? No. The Quran refers to Rome. There's a whole surah of the Quran known as Surah to Rome. And Allah speaks positively about Rome in Surah to Rome. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ألف لام ميم غلبت الروم بأدنى الأرض وهم من بعد غلبهم سيغلبون في بضع سنين لله الأمر من قبل ومن بعد ويومئذ يفرح المؤمنون. That Rome was defeated, but in a few years Rome will be victorious. And on that time, when Rome is victorious, Muslims are going to celebrate. The Quran speaks of two victories, min qabl wa min ba'd, two victories. We know about the first victory. It was the Byzantine Orthodox Christian Empire, not the Vatican. This was based in Constantinople. This is Rome. And the Quran speaks positively about Rome. The Hadith cannot contradict the Quran. The Quran is the supreme authority in Islam. Why does the Turkish Prime Minister not understand that? What's wrong with Islamic scholarship in Turkey? That you do not understand that the Quran is the supreme authority in Islam. Not even history can contradict the Quran. And then the Quran speaks about a Christian people who in time to come will be closest of all to you Muslims in love and affection. وَلَتَجِدَنَّ أَقْرَبَهُمْ مَوَدَّةً لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّا نَصَارَى. Who are these Christian people who in time to come would be closest of all in love and affection to Muslims? And we're not talking about Muslims who have their Qibla in Washington. No. When Washington says stand up, they stand up. When Washington says, sit down, they sit down. Sometimes Washington flies all the way and come into your own capital. We're talking about Muslims who remain faithful in their hearts to Allah and His Messenger, and who hold the mission of Islam that we do not tolerate oppression anywhere in the face of the earth. But who is the room? The way the Ottoman Empire waged war, jihad, eternal jihad, unjust jihad, for 500 years against Rome. That was Dajjal's triumph. That was the triumph of Dajjal. This is a false notion of jihad. And yet, this is what Europe experienced from the Ottoman Empire. So I cannot blame the author of this book for holding this view of jihad. Islamic eschatology does not present a picture of the end time in which Islam is going to triumph over all and Islam is going to rule the world. Muslims meaning? No. It's not a Muslim army conquering everybody. No. If Islam is to rule, then in the end time a Muslim army must conquer all rivals. Then Islam will rule. But that's not Islamic eschatology. Islamic eschatology, on the other hand, speaks of an alliance in the end time between Muslims and Rome. And so it's a joint effort. That alliance between Muslims and Rome will be visible most of all after the Malhama. Because after the Malhama, or the Armageddon, the next most important event which is to take place is the conquest of Constantinople. Notice, Nabi Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam referred to the city as Constantinople. And my limited understanding is that if the Prophet referred to it as Constantinople, then it is Sunnah. Am I wrong? It is Sunnah to refer to the city as Constantinople. And so Mustafa Kamal is out of place. Out of place to try to prevent me from using the name Constantinople. If I were to go to Turkey today and use the name Constantinople, they'll arrest me because it's illegal. I find that fishy. I find that mysterious. I say, Mustafa Kamal, are you serving Dajjal or are you serving Allah? You seem to be a disciple of Dajjal. The conquest of Constantinople takes place after the Great War. And that conquest of Constantinople will witness the alliance of Muslims with Christians, Rome. And so we give an end time, a picture of end time, of an alliance rather than exclusive Muslim rule over the world. So much then for, it's not just only, an alliance with Eastern Christians, Orthodox Christians, but as you heard in the little 8-minute talk before, the Quran prohibits us from maintaining friendly ties and being allies of the Western alliance.